क्या वो क्या जी फोन मेरे भाई कहाँ रखा तू
Good morning to everyone. All of you listen to my voice.
Yeah, madam. Yeah, good morning, madam.
So actually, I am taking the class now. Actually, I have only 2 classes. That is time, I will tell you, 12 to 1:30 and 3 to 4:30. That is mine. But unable to take the Vasanthi madam today class. She will take in afternoon. Okay. Now I am taking the class right now. Okay.
Yeah, madam.
Okay, all of you mute your voices. Okay. So this is the C6, right? C6 book in your environmental impact assessment and hazardous waste management. Okay. Okay. Now we are going to learn about EIA, that is Environmental Impact Assessment, right? So what is environment? So environment is derived from French word, that is environ, right? ENVIRON. So which means encircle, right? So that is around or surround. So in simple word, we can say that everything which surround us in that is called environment, right? So everything which surround us is collectively called term in as the environment, right? So it can be defined as all surrounding conditions that have direct impact on all human beings and animals. So environment is everything that is around us, right? So it is a basic life system. So it can be living or non-living things. It includes physical, biological, and also chemical, and also other natural forces, that is air, water, land, something, table, chair, bed, like that. Okay. So living things, what are the living things? So living in their environment, those are plants, animals, human beings, etc. Right? So in the environment, there are different interactions between animals, plants, soil, and also water, and also other living and non-living things. Right? So what is impact? So the impact of an activity is a deviation from the baseline situation. So that is caused by the activity. So that is, to measure an impact, you must know what the baseline situation. So this is the baseline. What is this baseline situation? So this baseline situation is the existing environmental situation or existing environmental condition in the absence of the activity. So the baseline situation is the key concept of EIA, right? So now let us look into environmental impact assessment, right? So environmental impact assessment or EIA, it can be defined as the study to predict the effect of a proposed activity or proposed project on the environment. So EIA full form is environmental impact assessment. So in simple terms, the meaning of EIA, that is a process through which an environmental impact of a proposed development is evaluated while undertaking environmental impact assessment. So the interrelated socio-economic and also culture and also human health impacts. So these are considered, right? So it is a process of evaluating the likely environmental impacts of a proposed project or development. So it is taking into account interrelated socio-economic and culture and also human related or human health impacts. So both beneficial and adverse. So EIA is a tool. Mind it, this word. EIA is a tool. So that is used to assess the positive and negative environment and economic and social impacts of the project. So this is used to predict the environmental impact of project in the pre-planning stage itself. So that decisions, right? So that decisions, it can be taken to reduce the adverse impact, right? So environmental impact assessment is a making tool, right? So it is used to identify the environmental, social, economic impacts of the project, that is prior to decision making. So basically EIA is a decision making tool, right? So whenever a development project is undertaken, for example, let us see in mining, right? Mining and also construction of dams and also construction of highways, right? So this developmental project is undertaken, right? So it will have environmental implications. So that are, it will change all the environmental variables. What are the environmental variables? That is the quality of soil, soil and the quality of air and quality of groundwater. So in that particular area, right? So, and then next we are going to history of environmental impact assessment. So what is the history? Evaluation and history. So the EIA, it is termed as one of the best policy innovation in the 1900s, right? So the main aim of EIA, that is to conserve the environment and bring out the best combination of economic and environmental costs and benefits, right? So you see, the birth of EIA is dated back to the 1970s, and in the year of 1969, the USA had brought its first national environmental policy, that is called NEPA, in the year of 1969. So the environmental impact assessment started as mandatory regulatory procedure that is originated in the early 1970s with the implementation of the National Environmental Policy Act, that is called NEPA, in the USA, right? So EIA process took off after the mid of 1980s. So after World Bank adopted EIA for major development projects, and which borrowed country, so it had to undertaken the EIA under the some of the bank supervisors, right? So you see, the EIA was initially practiced by developed nations, but slowly it was also introduced in developing nations, including India also, right? So Colombia and Philippines. So these two countries are the earliest examples of the developing nations. So who is introduced EIA in their policies? So Colombia brought in year of 1974 and Philippines in the year of 1978, right? So the worldwide EIA is now practiced in more than 100 countries by the mid of 1990s. So some of the countries, those are 110 countries. So those are applied EIA as a major environmental policy, right? Major environmental policy. So now EIA is a formal process in more than 100 countries, right? So in the year of 1989, EIA was adopted as the major development project by the World Bank, right? World Bank. So this EIA process took off after the mid of 1980s. Then next, you see this table, so environmental impact assessment history, okay, right? Now, environmental clearance. So from the central government, so that is required for 32 categories of developed projects under the industrial sectors. So those are industries, minings, thermal power plants, and also nuclear power plants, construction dams, and construction of highways, right? Just a minute. When did EIA starts in India? Anybody? Okay, I will tell. So EIA was first introduced in India in the year of 1976 to 1977. So when the Planning Commission directed the DST, that is called Department of Science and Technology. So that is to assess the River Valley project. River Valley projects. So from the point of view of the environment. So, but only the, you remember this word, only the after Bhopal gas disaster, right? So that is the year of 1984, right? So it was later extended for all those projects that required approval from the public investment board, that is called PIB, right? So environmental impact assessments, that is to help us to measure or predict the impact, so that any developmental project it will have on the environment. And at the same time, quantified of the identifying the impact and take on the basics of a taken decision, whether that is to undertake the project or rejected also. So it helps us to continuously monitor and assess the impact of the project in such a way that, right? So the impact can be continuously minimized. So for example, right, you see this picture, this is the normal condition, right? Normal condition. So when any developmental projects, such as I told already, industries, mining, thermal power plants, nuclear power plants, construction of dams, and construction of highways, and not undertaken. So this normal condition. So this is our environmental parameters in the normal condition. So now a project, let's say construction of dam is initiated. So this project will have impact on all the environment variables. What are the environment variables? Those are air, soil, and also aquatic life and displacement of people. So these are the some of the environmental variables. So EIA will help us to identify the all the environmental concerns in detail. So which is related to this particular project. So that is construction of dam. Just a second. So sorry for the disturbance. So EIA will help us to identify the all environmental concerns in detail, which is related to this particular project. So that is construction of dam. At the same time, it will help us to minimize the impact. So you see here. Right? So this is X, right? So this is Y, and this is X minus Y, right? So let us see, without the EIA, if magnitude of impact is equal to X, then after EIA. So the magnitude of the impact on the environmental variables will reduce to new a variable of Y, right? So this is the new variable. So this is the magnitude that is different XY. So which is the reduction of the impact on the environment. So that has been arrived by using the tool. So that is environmental impact assessment, right? So EIA is a tool to take a decision whether that is to undertake a project or abandon it. And if you are taking the project or approving it. So how to manage all the environmental concerns that are associated with this environmental impact, right? So the next, functions of EIA. What are the functions? So you see here, to identify the impact. So that is quantify all the impacts so that a project will have, right? The next, measurement and quantification of impact. So this will help us to assess the degree of the impact, which will vary with all the different kinds of projects, right? The next, mitigation of impact. So mitigation impact through the EMP, which means environmental management plan, right? So the next, finally, last one is monitoring and evaluation, right? So to continuously monitor and assess the impact and take the corrective action. So which will vary according to life cycle of the project. So these are the 4 functions of the EIA, right? The next, so this is the important questions on your examinations. Remember this, process of EIA. This is very important, right? So last time they are asking a process of EIA, right? About process of EIA. So for the purpose of environmental impact assessment, we have 5 stages. First one is screening, scoping, baseline studies, impact prediction, and finally last one is mitigation and monitoring. So now before that process, we have to understand that all the developmental projects that are undertaken will not have this kind of impact. So some projects will have a greater impact on a different variables of environment. So such as mining of construction and dams, which are large and greater implication for the environment. So, but at the same time, there are other projects also. So, which are then at the smaller scale and the nature and kind of impact, so that these projects will be different. So the draft environmental impact assessment notification. Impact assessment notification, that is the year of 2020. So this proposed to be an update to the environmental impact assessment, that is instead of 2016. So this is the latest. 2020 is latest and this is old one, right? So now the notification defines. So that is two categories of the developmental projects. So those are namely category A and category B. So in category A, all these projects which will have greater impact on the environment, such as mining and construction of dam, construction of highways, and similar kinds of projects under A category, right? So you remember this, under A category projects are national level appraisal projects only, right? And then for all the projects which are under this A category, environmental impact assessment is mandatory. Mind it. EIA is mandatory for this under category A projects. Those are national level appraisal projects, right? So all the projects that falls under the category A is EIA mandatory, right? Next one is category B. So these are the state level appraisal projects, right? So there is subcategorization of category B. Those are B1 category and B2 category. So now in B category projects, all the projects that fall under category B1 only, right? B1. So again, these classifications are based on the nature and extent of impact. So all the projects that will come under the B1 category, it will have to undergo environmental impact assessment. So in this category project, EIA is also mandatory, right? Then next B2. B2 category. So, and for the projects which falls under B2 category, EIA is not mandatory, right? Not mandatory. Remember this was in category A, EIA is must and should, and category B1 also EIA is mandatory, and in B2 category project, EIA is not mandatory. So now there is again a different, all the projects which are in category A, it will have to undergo EIA and appraisal by EAC. So EAC is a body which analyze and appraise the environmental impact assessment reboot of any projects. Remember this word, reboot of any project. So it stands for Environmental Appraisal Committee, right? EAC, Environmental Appraisal Committee, right? So at the level of state, there is another body which is called SEAC. It stands for State Level Environmental Appraisal Committee, right? So this is Environmental Appraisal Committee only. So this is State Level Environmental Appraisal Committee. So this is State Level Environmental Appraisal, Impact Assessment. So all the projects of A category will be appraised by EAC, right? EAC. And all the projects of category B and B2 appraised by SEAC, right? SEAC, that is State Level environmental appraisal committee. So there are two levels where the decision for approval or rejects of any projects is undertaken. That is EAC and SCAC, right? So now let us talk about one by one process of EAA. First one is screening, right? So screening. So not all development projects require EAA. So project screening helps in the identification of the projects that do require screening. It may be defined as the process of determining whether or not an individual project proposal requires a full-scale EAA and what the level of assessment it should be, right? So screening is done to determine whether project requires an EAA or not. So, and the level of assessment that is to be carried out. So, the threshold requirements, right? So, I will tell in that next classes this threshold requirement. So, this threshold requirement for an EIA, it may be depend on the monetary value of the project. So, the impact the project it will have or the type of the project it is. So in some places, there is a list of projects that is EAA is required, right? EAA is required. So when a project proposal, it has been submitted to the agency in charge of EAA in that particular area. So the agency sends a representative to the project promoter. So they discuss topics such as the reason of the project and size of the project and cost of the project and main stakeholders and oppositions and also whether some parts of the project those are negotiable or not. So the EAA agent also considers and interrogates all the people that are in charge of the different categories of the projects, that is to assess exactly what all the impacts of the project it will be, right? So a trip to the site that is very necessary during screening, right? So details such as the exact coordinates. So exact coordinates of the site are taken also. In situ, tests are also carried out and also pictures of the site and surrounding environment are also taken. So these will make the project more realistic and that is easy to assess while away from the site, right? So regulations applicable to the projects, those are also studied at this stage of the environmental impact assessment process. So this is important because these regulations, so it could be also determined whether a basic or full-scale environmental impact assessment is required, right? So screening facilitates informed decision making. So it provides a clear and well-structured and factual analysis of the effects and consequences of proposed action. So during this screening process, environmentally and socially and economically unsound projects are screened out. So the environmental impact of a project, it can change over time. So therefore, during this screening process as well as the whole EAA process. So impacts are considered over the lifetime of the project from the construction phase through to operations and after closing the plant, right? So on the level of screening, which is a first level of environmental impact assessment procedure, that is a decision is taken. So whether a project falls in the category where it is subjected to the procedures of EIA, right? So this is the screening. First process is screening, right? The next one is scoping. Second is scoping. So scoping is most important stage in the process of EIA. Remember this, it is the most important stage. So this stage identifies key issues and impact. So that should be further investigated. So this stage also defines the boundary in the time limit of the study. So it is done by consultant in consultation with the project proponent and guidance by the agency. So scoping is the stage in the environmental impact assessment process. So that makes the general public and also NGOs, right? So those are aware of proposed project and allows them to their opinions about the project. So during this scoping, the key issues, right? Key issues and impacts. So that should be further investigated or identified. So this identification is based on legislative requirements and international conventions, expert knowledge, and also public involvement, right? So the boundary and time limit of the study is also set, right? So now you see how scoping is done and what is the significance, right? As we know, the project are categorized in A and B category projects, right? So I already told here, right? So now in the process of scoping, all the projects are given all the projects which are subjected to EIA are given TOR. TOR. What is this TOR? Terms of reference, right? Terms of reference. So the terms of reference serves as a guide for EIA preparation. So an ideal terms of reference covers all the issues and impacts that have been identified during this scoping process. So you see here, the TOR contains the following informations. So first one is project description and list of the agencies or ministries responsible for overseeing the EIA process and making decisions. And next one is project site, and next one is EIA requirements in applicable laws and regulations and impacts and issues. So that is to be studied, and also mitigation and monitoring systems to be designed, and provisions for public involvement and key stakeholders, time frame for completing the EIA process, and expected work product and deliverables. And last one is EIA budgets. So these are the terms of reference contain the information, and a draft, this TOR, it can be made available for the public to review and make their comments, right? So as we have discussed the different kinds of project, will have different nature of impacts on the environment, right? That is mining. Mining will have a different set of environmental concerns. And the construction of dam, it is associated with the different set of environmental constructs. And also construction of thermal power plants. So it will have some different impacts, and it will cause the because it changes the environmental variables. So which is different from the construction of dam. So at the level of scoping, the TOR is given for every project, and TOR gives all the environmental parameters which needs to be assessed, right? So what are the environmental parameters? TOR gives all the environmental parameters. What are the environmental parameters? So those are air, right? Air, water, noise, soil, and socio-economic implications, right? So these are also very important points of in EAA. So not only these environmental variables, so but a socio-economic impacts of any project is also assisting in the process of EAA. So after furnishing this TOR, so which is given by the expert appraisal committee, right? So it is given by the EAC. So that is to project proposing party. So this study is given all these air, water, noise, soil, and socio-economic parameters. So and after all these studies includes baseline. Right? Baseline studies or baseline data. It should be obtained in likely changes predicted for the important attributes during construction and operation. So what are the baseline studies or baseline data? So in this stage, this is I think this is third one, right? Baseline studies are baseline data. In baseline studies, so the comprehensive study of the project site and its environment is carried out. And components studied include the physiochemical environments. Those are climate, meteorology, and geology, soil type, and also distribution, groundwater characteristics, and level of noise, level of air pollution, and the physical factors and biological things, and socio-economic and also cultural factors, right? So these factors come under the baselines, right? So air, level of air pollution. So it changes in the ambient level and the ground level concentration due to emissions from the point, line, and area source. And also effects on soil and materials, and also some vegetables, and also some of the human health also, right? And then next, noise. Noise, it changes in the ambient level due to noise generated from the equipment and movement of the vehicles. And effects on fauna, F-A-U-N-A, fauna and flora, and also human health. Human health. Next, physical factors, water and land, right? Water and land. So water, that is availability to competing users, and changes in the quality and sediment transport, and also ingress of saline water. In land, so the changes in the land use and drainage pattern, and changes in the land quality, that is including effects of waste disposals, and also changes in shoreline or river bank and their stability. So, and biological things is deforestation, and also shrinkage of animal habitat, and impact of flora and fauna. So that is due to contaminants or pollutants. So impact on rare and endangered species, and endemic species, and also migratory paths of animals, and including birds also, right? The next, socio-economic impact on the local community, including demographic changes and local infrastructure, economic activities, right? And also economic status, human health, and also impact of increased traffic also. Right? So these are the some baseline studies. The next one is impact prediction. So here, all significant environmental, social, economic impacts of the proposed projects. So those are identified and predicted, include the detailed elaboration of alternative to the project design. Right? So, and a prediction on the basis of the TOR, that is done, and that how the given project will change all the parameters on the basis of these baseline data. There are prediction which is done also, and the prediction is in a way the quantification of the impact that a developmental project will have on the environment. So first is baseline, which is condition without the given project, and then the prediction of it, that is prediction of changes, so which will because by the project is also mentioned in the EIA report, right? So this is prediction, and monitoring and mitigation. So proposed impacts and proposed mitigation measures occur as defined in environmental management plan, right? And we keep environment away from the impacts that are caused due to developmental projects, and mitigation measures that is reduce the adverse socio-economic impacts of the project and local benefits, and providing housing, schools, colleges, hospitals, power, and other social service. So it's monitoring whether the proposed impacts and proposed mitigation measures, those are occurs as defined in the Environmental Management Plan, EMP, right? Environmental Management Plan. So, and verification is done, and it is ensure that unpredicted impacts and failed mitigation measures are identified and addressed. So, we have an environmental management plan, right? So where we keep environment away from the impacts so that are caused due to the developmental projects. And we see the impacts, proposed impacts. So that developmental project is going to cause, and we see the proposed mitigation measures there, right? And also we see whether they are defined environmental management plan or not. After proper verification, it is ensured that addressed. Sometimes there are some impacts not predicted. We do not take mitigation measures for those impacts, and we have to verify them, and we have to ensure that there is no impact left and unpredicted, and we have to check the mitigation measures whether they have successful or not. So these unpredicted impacts and failed mitigation measures, they are identified and addressed, right? So this is the process of mitigation and monitoring in the EIA. And then next one is EIA report. So a single EIA report is produced and contains the integrated findings of the impact assessment and mitigation studies. So this report is used by the authorities in decision making, right? So after these stages, right? So after these stages are discussed about, I told here. So a report known as a draft EIA report, right? Draft EIA report. So that is produced. So it is called a draft because it has not been approved. So the report serves as a decision-making tool, right? Decision making tool to the public and as a guide for the proponent when executing the project. So for these reasons, the report, it must be written to the understanding of everyone. So in adherence to the TOR, terms of reference and international best practices. So this report gives a summary of the EIA process. So it starts with an executive summary of the project and ends with the details of the environmental management plan. So that will guide the execution of the project, right? So this is the EIA report. And review of the EIA report. What is the review? So this review examines the adequacy and effectiveness of the draft of EIA report. And it provides the information necessary for this decision making. So EIA report review undergoes internal review, external review, and formal public hearing, right? So an internal review that is carried out by selected expert in the regulatory agency, right? Regulatory agency. And the next, external review. So that is carried out by some of the professionals outside the regulatory agency. So some of the copies of the draft of EIA, those are sent across to these experts for review and feedback, right? And then public hearing. So this is carried out by the stakeholders. Stakeholders. So those that will be affected by the project in one way or the other. So this includes members of the committee where the project is to be cited, and NGOs, and also local governments, etc. Right? So the stakeholders involvement comes with a lot of benefits. So it helps to connect traditional knowledge of the environmental to this project. So this adds more details to the EIA report. It is also makes known the community's reviews about the project and prevents chaos associated with the development projects, right? Development project. So this is the review of the draft. And last one is, sorry, decision making, right? Decision making. So decision making refers to the final approval or authorization of the proposal. So it is usually includes a series of conditions under which development may be proceed. So at this stage, a project, it can be approved or and rejected or subjected to further change. So a project is approved if all concern raised during the review, those were addressed by the EIA team, right? EIA team, or if all significant adverse effects have been properly mitigated. So when these factors are not in place, the project will not be approved. So once a project it has been approved, the regulatory body issues the proponent and environmental impact statement. So this certificate, environmental impact statement, so this statement is a go-ahead order for the proponent to commence a project. So that is the decision making, right? So this is the EIA report here. Okay. You see here, first one is, what is this? Okay, right. So you see the difference between IEE and EIA, right? IEE and EIA. What is IEE? You know EIA. What is IEE? IEE means which is Initial Environmental Examination. Initial Environmental Examination. So this is short question in your examination. So they are asking, write the difference between IEE and EIA, right? So EIA, all of you know EIA, Environment Impact Assessment, and Initial Environment Examination. So in IEE, first one is carried out for small projects. So IEE carried out for small projects, but EIA carried out for big projects. And IEE addresses mostly known impacts, also addresses unknown impacts, and also conclusion on further study if required in IEA. In EIA, generally does not recommend for further study. And in IEE, inclusions of EPMs and issues and areas for further study. In EIA, detailed environmental protection measures, that is EPMs, and IEE scoping document not required, right? In EIA, scoping in public notice is required. So TOR approval by the concerned body, and scoping and TOR, that is to be approved by the, what is that? MOP, that is Ministry of Population and Environment, right? And publication of public notice after draft report and preparation, and notice to school and health post. And here public hearing to be conducted at the project sites, and no public hearing required here, that is in IEE. So the EIA report to be made public for 30 days before approval, and also approval within 21 days by the concerned body and approval by the MOPE within 90 days, right? Sorry, and no auditing is required in IAA, but environmental auditing must and should in EIA. So this is the difference between IEE and EIA, right? So now class is over. I will take the class at 12 o'clock, right? So for 15 minutes is break. Okay. Any doubts? Ask me.
Madam, good morning, madam.
Madam,
ఇది MOPE మేడం ఆర్ MOEF మేడం అది లాస్ట్ లో MOEF మేడం MOPE మేడం అది IAA లో 6 పాయింట్
MOPE మినిస్ట్రీ ఆఫ్ పాపులేషన్ అండ్ ఎన్విరాన్మెంట్
మరి MOEF అంటున్నా అదేనా మేడం
అది ఏమో తెలియదు నాకు ఇదైతే మనకి ఇక్కడ
మినిస్ట్రీ ఆఫ్ ఎన్విరాన్మెంట్ ఫారెస్ట్రీ అండ్
Actually, it is MOEF.
చేంజ్ చేశారు కదా ఇది యాక్చువల్లీ
ఇది MOEF కింద మారింది
Earlier, it is called it as MOPE. Now it is calling it as a MOEF.
ఓకే
Deputy also. In addition to MOEF, added this calamity.
MOEF ని ఇంత ముందు MOPE అని పిలిచేవాళ్ళట.
ఓకే
ఇప్పుడు అది MOEF CC అయ్యింది MOEF CC
ఓకే లేటెస్ట్ అప్డేషన్ మీరు చేసుకోవాలి అది మనకేమో బుక్ ఉంది మనం ఫాలో అవుతాం కదా
ఎప్పుడైనా సరే అడుగుతారు తప్ప ఫాస్ట్ ఏం అడగదు జనరల్ నాలెడ్జ్ అంటే ఇంత ముందు పేర్లు ఎలా ఉండేది
ఓకే నో ప్రాబ్లం మీరు అప్డేట్ ఉంటారు కదా మీకు అప్డేట్ ఉంటుంది మీకు తెలుస్తుంది ఇంకా మీరు ఏజెన్సీలో జాబ్ చేస్తుంటారు అందుకని మీకు ఇంకా అప్డేట్ ఉంటారు మీరు
ఓకే
ఉంటే నాకు చెప్పొచ్చు నేను మిస్టేక్ చెప్పినా నాకు చెప్పొచ్చు పర్వాలేదు
No, madam. Actually, we are following, but however, the way you are telling, the way you are explaining.
Okay, no problem. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you, madam.
Okay. Bye.
Thank you, madam. Thank you.
Okay. Bye.